to another episode of Us Anxious Folk. I am very excited for today's episode because I am here with Eliah Prichard, who is a breathwork and boundaries coach. She's also the founder of Kaleidoscope, which is a self-development community which inspires people with creative coping and boundary setting, which I recently discovered for myself and I'm just diving into, which is amazing. Welcome, Eliah. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here too. And to be honest, I sort of recently discovered embodiment and breath coping as well. So we're all on the journey together.
Awesome. Well, I was just telling you before we started recording that I always start every episode with asking my guests, tell me your anxiety story.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't find you in the sense that I, came across you speaking to someone about anxiety. I found you in quite a different way, which I'll get to in a minute. But I didn't want to assume that you had a background in dealing with anxiety, but I also felt
I
that
have a background in anxiety for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, being human, most people do.
Yeah.
But also, I know that the work you do relates to anxiety a lot. And so I thought that maybe there would be some background there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so tell me your story and how you
Sure.
got to doing what you do.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. I mean, it all kind of weaves together, right? Like my personal story, my relationship with my emotions, the work that I'm doing as an embodiment and boundaries coach, like it all kind of comes together. And a big part of why I'm doing the work that I'm doing, teaching breathwork and emotional liberation, is because I was not emotionally liberated for most of my life. I don't know how far back we want to go in 1990 and tell you where we began. But the short of it is I didn't really realize the extent that I had anxiety in my system every single day until the last couple of years of doing like body-based healing work and somatic healing work. When I was a kid, we had a prolonged sort of medical trauma in my family, and I decided at that point in time that the best way to process that stress and that grief was to just kind of shut it down and not have any needs in the family and really just contribute to other people. So as far as layman's terms, I became a raging people pleaser and really just focused on trying to support my parents and my family and kind of push all of my energy outwards. So there's a long period of sort of self-discovery, even just in realizing that I was doing that I was shutting all of my own needs down, and would abandon all of my energy needs and my emotional needs in order to support others. That's something that's supported by society, right? Like, oh my God, you're so helpful, you're so caring. And I'm like, I don't have any problems. I'm a great person. And you realize that actually, no, you're just so stressed out and anxious about anything going wrong that you just close off and ignore that and just focus on other people in order to cope. So I did that for a very long time until I started to go through my master's program in couples and family therapy and do a lot of work in extreme trauma healing with mostly youth populations, but also adults, and go to therapy myself. And then through that process, I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. I do shut everything I feel down. And there is a massive amount of anxiety in my system as well.
Yeah.
I've just become really functional with it. It took kind of going through that to realize what I was doing and start to break the patterns of keeping myself out of the equation to feel safe. I don't know if you can relate to that. There's sort of these two spectrums of anxiety, either fully taking over your system, and going into panic attack mode, and then the one where everything is just dissociated from to keep it feeling safe, really. I think so. That was my experience. I thought I'd healed a lot of it up until a couple of years ago. I was much better at breaking those people-pleasing patterns and bringing myself into relationships and allowing things to not be okay and have that not stress me out, right? Like really emotionally differentiating myself, so that I could stay calm and at peace while other people were having like upsets or kind of moments of dysregulation. But also when I was upset and when I was dysregulated, I could bring that into the relationships and allow other people to support me, right? But in 2021, actually, I discovered breathwork as a coach teaching boundary setting. I was on a mission to figure out, well, how do we clear the emotions that keep us from speaking our truth? The anxiety, the anger, the guilt, the grief, the shame. How do we clear those emotions and really process them through so that we can feel safe taking up space and being heard, and sometimes opposing the people that are around us in order to stay in alignment ourselves? And it took a while, but I realized breathwork, in my opinion, is one of the fastest ways to do that, because it's a tool that anyone can use. It's barrier free if you're a human that breathes. And it's super, super potent in regulating the nervous system and bringing it out of those states of stress. So short story, long story short, I went into a 6-month breathwork training, trauma-informed breathwork training specifically, and they really focused on your own journey as the facilitator. And during that program, while I thought I'd cleared most of my anxiety, I realized that I had not. And I still had these pretty significant, I would call them like nervous system programs in my body that didn't feel safe being seen and didn't still feel safe being held by other people or speaking up or showing up to do something without the answers. You know, I would get very nervous public speaking or having to run workshops where like my vision would sort of blur and my heart would be racing and I'd be sweating and I'd have no idea what I'm saying. All of that was still in my body. And really slowing down and doing tons of breath work and getting into what it feels like to be present for the first time, was what it took over those like 3 months, where we were just doing our personal training as a facilitator before facilitating other people. And it became really clear to me that I just was operating in a stress state of all the time, you know, really focusing on doing more and acting more and trying to control my future rather than just being present and calm in my body. And in my opinion, found that like it's one of like the sneakiest forms of anxiety, I think, because you're like, oh, you're so productive. You're getting so much done. Look at how good I am at like creating my future and making things happen. Where it's really like, no, I feel super anxious and out of control of what's happening. And I'm trying to do instead of just being.
Yeah.
And like listening to what the world is creating with me, you know?
Wow.
So that's where I'm at right now. I teach people how to clear anxiety. I teach embodiment practices and boundary setting, and all in the name of kind of liberating that inner voice and feeling safe taking up space as the unique person that you are, because that's most what I needed to learn.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. What a ride I just went on listening to all of that. That was, wow. I did not expect to relate to so much of that. Especially because, as you said, there are those spectrums, and I've always seen myself and experienced being on the non-functioning kind of side of things. But I mean, even the start where you said abandoning yourself at a young age and people pleasing, and you know, that idea of other people's dysregulation, having to fix that and not being okay with that. I feel that deeply. And I love what you said about if you're a human who breathes. It's just so good, because I think people a lot of the time with anxiety, they say, you know, I feel panicked, I feel anxious, I'm tired of feeling that. But I mean, the reality is, if you're a human being that feels, you're going to feel those things at some stage, you know, whether it's something you expect to feel out of a grief or trauma, or something you don't expect to feel.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
And it's
that's,
so normal, right? I think
yes.
that as adults, we often receive the message that to be emotionally regulated and mature, we need to just get over it and we need to push it out of the way and we need to not feel embarrassment or shame or anxiety or stress. And that's what it means to be emotionally intelligent, and we use all these big words and we're like, but then the reality is that like we all feel stressed out. We weren't taught how to be emotionally balanced. And it is a skill that you have to learn. Like our bodies have manuals.
Yeah.
And we're still learning a lot about the human body, but it is a skill that we have to learn. And the goal isn't to just get rid of the emotion. The goal is to transform it so that it's supportive of you. Like the genius of anxiety is that it's your nervous system speaking directly to you, telling you that you're out of alignment with a core need, desire, or expectation, right? And when used as an indicator in that way, it can become like your most powerful tool for like liberation and empowerment, because you're like, oh, I feel that ping of anxiety coming up in my system. I know that's my body telling me something really important. And, after some practice and some education and some mentorship, I have the tools that I need to slow down, to feel safe turning inwards and seeing myself, holding myself in that compassionate witness, and really listening to the genius within, whatever that anxiety is trying to tell us. Like your nervous system is incredible. It's not something that just like makes your heart beat and, your brain work and your immune system function. Like it's your creative channel. It's your connection to your inner voice and your intuition and your body's deep knowing that like you are working in a collaborative relationship with the universe and all of the energy of this world, right? And when you learn how to feel safe enough in your body, which we can do even as adults, you can connect to all of that data in there, for lack of a better word, divine guidance, really, and trust that your intuition knows what you need. And then anxiety doesn't become so scary. It becomes like fascinating and curiosity sparking. And you're like, it doesn't necessarily feel quote unquote good in the body. You're not like, oh, I love this feeling of data downloading from my subconscious,
Yeah.
But you get to be like, oh, thank you, body, for telling me that something is out of alignment. And maybe my mind just hasn't recognized it yet. And I'm going to do some breath work. I'm going to do some form of creative coping, journaling or exercising or taking a walk. And I'm going to access that. And I've got all the freaking answers within. And how cool is that? And once you give, in my experience, anxiety an action, once you give it a reason to exist, it will then clear. And then that's the process of quote unquote letting it go. The release isn't about pushing it out. It's about giving it a purpose.
Yeah.
And then it'll like bring you back down into a rest state, right?
Yeah. I was listening to something recently where I believe it was Joe Dispenza talking about the purpose of anxiety is to mobilize. And especially for those of us who feel panicked by it, the tendency is to contract and to freeze.
Right.
And if we keep doing that, then like you said, it becomes that program, that nervous system program, and then we aren't giving it the necessary release, the outlet. Yeah. So would you say that breath work is a way to give that energy a release?
Absolutely. So they're in two ways though. So one is that breath work, specific breathing patterns are incredible at, like I said, shifting the nervous system from a state of stress, where you're gearing towards that fight, flight, or freeze or fawn, down into rest. So we do know that scientifically. Now, of course, breath work has been around for thousands and thousands of years in many different cultures. So it's not something that like Western scientific communities have just discovered, but the Western world of science is finally studying it in a way that allows people to understand its impact. So there are breathing patterns, one which we'll do in a little bit, that are really effective in directly working with your nervous system to get it out of those states of panic. And that supports you on a physical level, but it also supports you on a cognitive and mental level, so that your brain, the part of you that's trying to control and that is maybe freaking out because you don't know what you're experiencing in your body, and then that's increasing the panic, it gives your mind something to do, right? It gives your it gives you something to think about ultimately, which is why it's easier than meditation for a lot of people. All you have to do is tell your left brain, all right, hey buddy, this is what I need from you. I know you want to take action, and I know you're trying to figure out the answer. So all you have to do is breathe in this specific way for this specific amount of time. And then you're doing your job, and your brain will go like, okay, great. I got it. You're telling me what to do. I've got an answer. I've got a task. Perfect. I don't need to know everything that's going on right now. Like, I'm good, ready to do. So it supports your brain in that way. It's, instead of trying to say like, why are my thoughts racing and I need them to quiet down and I need them to calm down and shut up, you can just be like, no, your thoughts can be fine. Don't worry about it. Just focus on breathing. So it's calming to the brain in that way, and into the mind, really, to the mind. But then I guess the third way, really, there's three that it supports the anxiety and releasing, is that it starts to build your tolerance for being in your body.
Yeah.
And it builds your, what we call autonomic flexibility, so that those things that might activate panic in your environment or your relationships or your thoughts, they're not so activating anymore, because you're getting used to being in control and feeling safe in your body, even when it does start to activate towards anxiety. So you have a lot more flexibility with just adapting to the things that are happening around you, and being willing to sit with that feeling of perhaps panic as it sparks, and then bringing it back down and trusting that you're resourced to do that yourself. I feel like it's one of the most pure empowerment tools that we have in that way, because there are no barriers to it, and it does build your safety in your body, and it makes sense of all these crazy emotions that we feel. And it allows you to just slow down and trust that process of breathing, slowing down, turning in, and then figuring out whatever that action is that you need to take, that'll move you, right? That'll motivate you and mobilize you towards whatever it is that you need to do, you know? Maybe you need to tell someone no that you said yes to. Maybe you need to say yes to something you said no to. Maybe you're like, actually, I'm working in a totally toxic environment and that doesn't feel good, and I need to expand my options instead of thinking that I'm stuck, right? It's always going to be unique, whatever that mobilization initiative is at the end of the practice. But yeah, it's a pretty potent tool. And I have to say, like, I'm not a like embodiment person. Like, I did not come from this world of being in my body and dancing and being like, can't we all just eye gaze? Don't you love that? You know, it was not my true nature. Like I said, I was very like, I closed myself off, and I connected with people a lot, but it was at the sacrifice of bringing my authentic self into the relationships. It's a very special version of emotional unavailability. But I was not actually in my body. It took me a really long time to connect to it. And I'm still on that journey of self-healing and finding that presence between my mind and body, and that opening. So I'm throwing that out there, because if I told my 20-year-old self that I was a breathwork facilitator, she would have been like, gag, like, gross. Why would that sound disgusting? Why would you do that? And I get the resistance that people might feel when they hear that word, where they're like, oh, that just sounds like woo-woo and mushy and kind of like cuddle therapy, where you're just like, oh no, I don't need to breathe, you know, like, I'm good. But I have found that it's one of the fastest tools to self-healing. So that's why I'm offering it. That's why I'm teaching it on the Kaleidoscope channel and in my Breathe memberships and programs. But I just thrown out there for anyone that feels a little bit resistant or feels a little like, that sounds scary, I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
It's
that's
it's it's safe and it's tamer than you think, and you get to control the journey, which is amazing about it.
I'm glad that you said that about it being safe and the aspect of, you being able to kind of tailor it, because how I found you, I I actually think it was maybe a suggested video on YouTube. I don't know if I was searching for something in particular, but I came across maybe breathwork for either juicy mornings or breathwork for energy, one of the two. Um, and I'm new to breathwork, and I've only kind of done it in a very loose way, in like yoga classes sometimes, or
Hmm.
the occasional like Instagram video where I'm like, oh, I'll try this, and then I've
Yeah.
come away from it being like, that was panicky and I didn't like it. And
Yeah.
just that, I mean, I'm still learning to be safe in my body too, but in the sense of breath work, I found that it would hurt my chest, and
Mhm.
I didn't really understand what I was supposed to be getting from it, and it just made me feel a bit more tense. But for whatever reason, I clicked on your video, and I said this to you. I don't know if it was your hair or like the way you guide, but I just felt safe, and your guidance is very easy to digest.
Mm,
It's, I mean, you don't sort of faff around with talking a
yeah.
whole lot. You deliver what needs to be delivered. And I did the breathwork practice, and I felt so um, energized, but in such a safe way. And I
Mm,
hadn't had that before. And I was like, I need to do more of this.
yeah.
This chick's great.
Yeah.
And I
What do you
love your
think that
practices.
was? Like outside of something that I did, what do you think that was that allowed you to feel like you had the permission to settle in?
Yeah, I mean, I
Like what was
honestly,
the belief or
I don't know if it was just maybe where I'm at in my own sort of healing journey.
Mhm.
But I did say to you that you mentioned the curve of chaos, and
Mhm.
that sensation that comes up that kind of can feel really overwhelming and panicky. And I just related to that. It resonated with me so deeply. And I remember thinking, this is like, this lady understands what this feels like.
Mm,
And because she's given me a way to kind of cognitively understand it while
yeah.
also sensing it in my body, it was like the
Right.
two things connected and everything just kind of fell into place. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that ability to understand what's going on in your body and that it's safe.
mm,
And it sounds like that it gives you a level of control, right?
yeah,
A level of
yeah,
understanding, like what to expect
yes,
and how to
yes,
guide your journey from
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Hmm.
And it just,
It's huge. Thank you for that feedback. Yeah.
oh, thank you.
It's important, right? It's important to, in my opinion, if you're moving into practicing breath work, to understand that you are always in control.
Mm,
And your journey through your body and connecting and finding that safety is going to be different than somebody else's.
mm,
And there are breathwork practices that I believe are not trauma informed happening out there in the world, especially as breathwork is becoming quite trendy. Um, and my encouragement to anyone practicing is to always, always, always go at your own pace, no matter
mm,
what an instructor is telling you to do at any point in time. Trust your body. Trust your
mm,
body.
mhm,
Um, that is like the core of what makes it so potent is that you learn to trust your body. So if anyone is ever pushing you past something or trying to direct in a forceful way, like just say no, thank you.
yeah,
And do your own thing because you don't have to push with the breath.
yeah,
It can be powerful to, like you said, learn that it's safe to sit with some of those sensations while you're breathing because it does alter your state of consciousness after a certain amount of time. Um, Learn that it's safe to sit with those, but also you don't have to. If
mm,
today's not the day, you can do it tomorrow. You can figure out when you want to push past it. And people get to play with that, right? You get to play with how long am I going to hold this breath? Like maybe you do 3 minutes of activated breathing and you're feeling the lightheadedness or some of the like auditory shifts, or you're feeling that tingling in your body. And that feels a bit edgy, but then you go into a top hold and you're holding your breath and you feel the energy move through and you're like, okay, I can sit with this. But then you're just sitting there and you're like, I still am holding my breath.
Mm.
I'm still holding my breath. Like, this is a lot longer than I've ever maybe held my breath. And on one hand, you're thinking, but I feel fine. And on the other hand, your body's like, I think you should probably breathe now, maybe, or like not your body really, that would be the mind being like, are you sure you shouldn't breathe? And you're like, but I feel okay, And so you get to become a part of all these internal dialogues. And maybe that day you let the breath hold out before you actually need to physically. And that's okay, because the next time you get to go back and be like, I trust that my body will tell me when it needs to breathe. And you can hold it a bit longer, but everyone's also just going to have different activations with different breaths. So you might follow a YouTube video and you're like, nope, not what I needed today. Like, that was not the breath for me.
Yeah.
And you learned something. Learned something, right? And you
Mhm.
can slow the next breath down when you try it again, or you can speed it up, or you can change the pattern. It is totally up to you. And it's just the practice of tuning in and finding that safety that's almost more potent than the type of breath that you're doing. Right. So trust your bodies, really, and know that it's okay. It's okay to drop the breath. It's okay to pick it up. It's okay to activate it. It's okay to do it for 30 seconds or an hour, like whatever you need. That's your journey.
It's everything you're saying is just the word that's coming up is boundaries. And
Yeah.
I think like that plays into what you were saying before about learning what you need and learning how to be okay with figuring that out for yourself.
Yeah. And it can be hard sometimes, especially with anxiety in the system. That makes you want to panic and run away, or totally freeze and shut down and ignore your needs. Right. And the reality is, during like a meditative breathwork practice, for instance, which is anything where you're breathing longer than about 8 minutes, because after around the 8-minute mark, your body is going to start to activate towards a state of consciousness shift. But in a meditative session, you might have, say, 8 people in a session. One person's going to look like they're asleep. And one person's going to be there with their eyes open, looking totally disinterested. One person might be rolling around crying. Another person's going to be like getting up and moving into cat cow and like breathing in different ways. Someone else might be like rage screaming. Like, everyone's on their own journey. And I know a big part of my process was learning that that's safe. And especially when I'm being facilitated, when someone is holding space for me, that I don't have to follow their rules. I get to express whatever needs to come out of my body, movements. Maybe I just want to lay there and dance, or like tap my fingers around my body and like activate some of those energetic codes. I never felt safe doing that before. I'd go into a yoga class and I'd be like, I need to shift positions every time they tell me to, and I need to make sure that they think I'm doing this right, and that they think I'm being respectful by following their directions. And breathwork releases so much of that, because suddenly you're like, oh, honoring my body is number one. That's the first thing I need to do, and that's the only thing I need to do.
Wow. Yeah. So tell me how we kind of get to that place of feeling that freedom to do what we need in that moment. Because I just thought of maybe dancing around or something, and my body was immediately like, no.
No. How about we don't?
Yeah. So what was that like for you, getting to that place where you could just be okay with what you needed?
Yeah, it took time. And honestly, like, I still feel some of those old scripts come up in my body. The first thing I practiced was having people facilitate me in breathwork sessions, right? Like that. Well, for starters, I didn't know how unsafe I felt. I had no idea, right? It was totally out of my realm of perception, how unsafe I felt in my body, how unsafe I felt stepping into situations that were unknown, unsafe feeling like I didn't know all the possible outcomes of a situation, and I didn't know what all the answers were that I might need, really unsafe being seen and feeling like I was going to be enough with what I had, right? And I was totally oblivious to it, completely oblivious to it. Because on the outside, I was really productive and I was very capable and I got a lot of things done and I was so smart, and it was like, had all of these sort of egotistical, like surface level protectors there, keeping me from the parts that felt fear. And so one of the first parts of my journey was finding a facilitator through this program and through just like local resources in Los Angeles, where I was at the time, and just practicing it. And the first time I went on, it was a Zoom session. So it was just one person facilitating over Zoom. There were maybe 30 other people in the class, and they said, okay, everyone set yourself up, go get some water, get your blankets, whatever you need. And I honestly didn't need anything, but I immediately got up and like left the Zoom session, because you need to be on recording, they need to be able to see you breathe just so that they can support you if anything comes up. And I just immediately got up and went to the kitchen and was like, I must need some water right now for sure. No, I didn't. And then I got my glass of water and I was standing in the kitchen, just noticing how frozen my body was and how much my body did not want to go back into my totally private living room. No one was home. I was totally, quote unquote, safe when it came to like physical danger. Nothing was present that would offer that. But my body just did not want to go back in there at all. And I remember in that moment just having a conversation with him. I was like, wow, okay, like I see you. I see you. This is hard for you right now. And it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. We're going to go in and we're going to practice someone else holding you in a space where you're about to breathe and you don't know what's going to happen. And if anything, just lay there. Just lay there and be witnessed. Maybe that's enough today. Maybe you don't need to fully activate into a breath for the full 60 minutes. Maybe you just lay there on the Zoom call and you let someone else give you love and support along with 30 other people. Like they're probably not even looking at you, they're just there to make sure you're good if you need anything.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of the beginning of the process, was just being willing to be seen, healing when I didn't know what that healing was going to look like. Every breathwork session is different. Sometimes you're laughing, sometimes you're crying, sometimes you access like codes to universal consciousness, and sometimes you're just laying there thinking about your like grocery list the entire time.
Yeah.
So really just giving yourself permission. Well, I'll speak for myself. Giving myself permission to take time with it was a big part of that beginning journey. Trusting that I will find that safety. The more I just practice slowing down and turning inwards and giving it a chance. So it wasn't always in meditative breathwork sessions. It was also in shorter integrative breathwork sessions, practicing the ones like I have up on the YouTube channel, or other ones that like people offer through their Instagrams, or through private channels and memberships. And integrative is anything that's under 8 minutes of activated breathing. So usually, in the integrative ones that I offer on YouTube, they're like about 3 to 5 minutes of activated breathing. And a little bit of buffer on each end. But it just takes time. You got to titrate up with finding that safety in the body. Like it's not a pill. It's not like reading a prescriptive book that's like, do this to have an amazing morning, and you're like, okay, I did the 5 things and now I should be having an amazing morning. Like it's not that prescriptive. Yeah, everyone just needs to breathe. That's the commonality. That's the thing that can be generalized. Your breath is so freaking powerful in connecting you to your body and to your inner voice. But it's going to be your journey, and you can trust that. All you have to do is just start creating a container, like time in your day or your week, to practice. And there's no one right way to do it, but it should feel good.
Okay.
It should feel good. And you get to decide where your edge is at for that day, And you also ultimately get to decide whether you're doing breath work or not, Maybe you need to do something else to start finding that safety in the body and connecting. Right now, I'm not doing as much meditative breath work. I'm doing a lot of hot yoga because that's what feels good, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you're taking walks every day and you're just connecting to your breath while you're doing that. That is a beautiful journey. But it's that process of, for me, it was a process of feeling safe being seen first, and then learning how to trust what my body was telling me. That made the biggest difference. And it just takes time. It takes time. And sometimes massive things can drop in a matter of an hour. And that is so cool when you're like, I just shifted some serious stuff from my childhood. Like, oh my gosh, I felt it like leave my body. And that's incredible. And then you go into the next session, you're like, I'm ready, because the mind wants to take over. And they're like, we accessed it. The thing that's going to clear all the things that challenge us, and you go into the next session, you're like, I'm just distracted today. It's not happening.
This doesn't feel good. Nothing's happening.
This doesn't feel good. I'm bored. I'm confused. I'm angry at myself for not accessing consciousness and awakening, and like, that's a part of the process, is understanding that like, we don't need to control. All we need to do is turn inwards and trust that our bodies have the answer. And it takes time to learn that, like building any other muscle.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's after doing like 10 years of mindset work, from my work as a trauma healer and a therapist, and of someone that just totally nerded out on all self-development things, I felt like I had made a lot of gains, and I had, in the way of understanding how to navigate the world through thought and language, right? Using the right words to set boundaries, communicating effectively. But it didn't matter when my body hadn't been taken along for the ride. Like, it didn't matter what my mind wanted to create for my life and the things that I decided I wanted to feel, living abundantly and being creatively inspired. Like, it didn't matter that my mind had decided I wanted to do all of these things, because my body was still like, that's great, but I don't feel safe doing that. So I'm not going anywhere until you learn how to like slow down and actually listen to me and release all the things that have been built up over the years, right? When we don't process emotion through most of our lives, and most of us don't because we weren't taught how to do that as kids, your body's just going to store that and hold on to it like a little knot in your nervous system. And it's doing that as a favor to you, saying you still have this event that you need to process, and I'm just going to hold on to it until you're ready to do that.
I'm just going to keep this over here.
Yeah. Like it's in the filing system.
Yeah.
That thing where you like panic at the grocery store when you're like feeling overwhelmed, or, you get really angry during rush hour traffic. Like, we're just going to hold on to that for you until you turn inwards and actually fully release it, through the process of connecting, integrating, finding the wisdom in what's being held in the body, and then finding those aligned actions to move you forward. And breath work is just really supportive of that, right? Really building that trust, and that trust in the process of connecting. And once you slowly find safety in the body, it will release. Trauma will release. The old beliefs that are holding you back will release. And all that stuff you've been packing since you were a kid will come into the present moment. And that's kind of, in my experience, those moments where you find that emotional and energetic liberation, where you're like, find the flow with communicating what you need and staying in alignment no matter what's happening around you. Because you're like, oh, I dealt with the past. I went through it. I revisited it. I processed it. I sent it love and compassion that I didn't have when I was a kid. I sent it all that understanding that I didn't have when I was a kid. And now we're good. So now we just get to create. We get to like paint with what's happening, paint with the like energies of the universe while it's unfolding around us, even when it seems chaotic, because let's be honest, it can feel chaotic sometimes in relationships and environments when things are happening that you can't control. But when you're present, you just get to decide how you're going to deal with it. And it doesn't become a trauma that gets stuck in the body anymore.
I just got mad Pocahontas vibes as you were saying paint with the colors. I was like, going back
we're
to
gonna
that
run
song.
the hidden pine trails of our inner forest is what we're gonna do.
It sounds like it's a process of, I mean, especially in your case, it sounded like it was adding and adding and adding and then subtracting, like learning all this stuff and achieving and doing, and then you had to subtract some things. And find what was underneath all of that to be able to go
Right.
forward again.
Yeah. And I think it is for a lot of people, right? Where like that's where we feel safe is in our mind. Thinking, finding the answers, being active, going out and doing things. And of course, like the mind is a beautiful, powerful thing. It can learn stuff, it can retain information. That's all very important. But through the practice of embodiment-based healing, which breathwork is, you do start to experience your inner voice and your intuition and your body's inherent wisdom. And there's so much less information in that because the body doesn't have to figure out everything that's going to happen in the future. It doesn't have to have all the answers. In my experience, usually, if you're following your inner voice and your intuition, you'll get like a one-word direction. It'll just be like, quit your job. Most recently for me, it was sell everything you own. And I was like, what? What do you mean? But then what? What do you mean sell everything I own? It's like, sell everything you own and leave Los Angeles. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
But then what? And it was like, don't worry about it. I'm like, okay.
Wow.
And I, over the course of practice over the last couple of years with the embodiment practices, which has really like moved me so far from just the mindset work, I have that level of safety now to trust that intuition and go, okay, all right, I'm going to show up and I'm going to do this thing that my inner voice is telling me to do. And I'm going to trust that it's going to work out. And it always freaking does. It always does.
Yeah.
When you're able to show up in that way. But it's not going to tell you all the millions of things. It's not going to like sell your stuff and then you're going to find an apartment here and then you're going to get a job here. Like X, Y, and Z. All you have to do is, it's not a full program. It's like the journey unfolding, right?
Yeah.
Which is so beautiful. And I think I maybe skipped over my thought really of the mindset work versus embodiment work. But after 10 years of mindset work, this embodiment work has healed more parts of my beliefs that held fear in my body, the parts of my body that really kept me from doing the things that I love, public speaking and teaching and creating with people. Like it's healed more in 2 years than anything my mind could have done in a lifetime. Yeah, the shift from healing the body up, from the body up instead of the mind down, has been really potent.
Yeah.
And it's scarily simple.
We don't like that though. We like to make it complicated.
I know. Yeah. It's terrifyingly simple.
Yeah. Okay.
But slowing down is like the hardest thing for people to do sometimes. Right?
It is. It is. Yeah. Especially as you said, when there's something triggering there, when there's a fear there, when there's a belief there, we don't want to look at that and we tend to turn away from it. And so that brings me to the idea of, I know a lot of people who deal with non-functioning anxiety shy away from meditative and breathwork practices because they are triggering. So how would you say to approach that? I know you've spoken about, listening to what you need and you being in control, but how could you really make that simple for someone who really finds the idea of breathwork to be triggering and scary?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, especially if you have a history with hyperventilation, for instance, that's going to be a map in your nervous system that might activate if you go into a breathwork practice and someone says, breathe in this really activating way for 10 minutes. Your body's gonna be like, I know this. This feels like hyperventilation. And then you're gonna go into panic, So the first thing that I would do is just start really slow with a calmer breath. So in through the nose, out through the mouth. It feels just like normal breathing sometimes, but when you're doing it intentionally, it's going to be different in your body. So taking really long inhales through the nose, filling your belly all the way up to the chest, and then exhaling really slow, maybe doubling the length of the exhale from the inhale, would be a great place to start. right? And just doing that in a cycle. So breathing in and then breathing out, breathing in and then breathing out, fully emptying the belly. And maybe you just start there. And depending on your level of sensitivity, it might even just look like 30 seconds of that in the morning before you take your first sip of coffee, or before you journal, or before you head off to work, right? Maybe you're just in the car and you're feeling stressed out going into work in the parking lot, and you just stop for 30 seconds to take those 5 intentional breaths, right? So really, when I'm talking about going at your own pace, I mean, go at your own pace. But just start in through the nose and out through the mouth. And one of the next steps up from that, which I'm going to offer in our practice today, is doing what we call a triactive breath. Dr. Andrew Huberman talks about it as cyclic sighing. So it is one of the breaths that's been studied for regulating the nervous system. Some people will teach the triactive all through the mouth, and often in my meditative breathwork practices, I will teach it breathing in all through the mouth, and it's a 3-part breath, filling the belly, filling the chest, with a double inhale there, and then exhaling through the mouth. That's a very activating breath, but you can do that triactive breath all through the nose, and then either exhaling through the nose or through the mouth. Again, really long. Double inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth, super long. And that's going to start to bring your nervous system back down. Now, the genius of this breath and why I'm offering it in this way, so we're adapting it for people that might have those maps for panic or hyperventilation, adapting it to slow it down, is that it mimics hyperventilation, right? When we're hyperventilating, you're going, and you have those step up inhales, right? And so it is the body actually trying to regulate when you're in those states of panic. But if you just bring that tiny level of intention and slowing the inhales down through the nose, and then exhaling so slow, maybe you purse your lips to do that, exhaling so slow, you can use the genius of your nervous system, but in a way that brings the nervous system down rather than continues to escalate it. So that's the first thing. Start with really small amounts of time, and then just make sure your breath is really slow. And if that's still too activating, just breathe in through the nose, out through the nose. And that's going to be enough, right? We're not running a marathon. There's nowhere to go. We don't have to go super fast. Like, that's going to be enough for your body, and that's okay. I would say that if anything, that's how I use breath work the most throughout my day, is in those moments of stress, just noticing my system start to activate and taking like 5 slow breaths, and reminding myself, I'm going to do this thing that I'm doing. Like, I'm living my life. I don't need to feel stressed during it. I can come back down into the present and just allow things to be. And I'm just going to do it in these little blips of time throughout my day. I probably do that 30, 40 times a day, just bringing it back to the breath, and like being in my body, right? So yeah, start slow, breathe slow, take it at your own pace.
Thank you.
And if it doesn't feel good, don't do it. Just don't do it.
Yeah. Know when to call it on yourself and just ease back.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that when you hyperventilate, your body's trying to regulate, because I think we forget that so often. We, attach to that feeling of panic and think, oh my God, my body's, messed up. It's something's gone wrong here. But we are trying. Our body is trying to regulate us. Yeah.
It's trying to support you in balance. The body's always in a state of healing at all times. Right.
Amen.
Always in a state. Hallelujah. Here we go. Yeah. And it knows what to do. What to do. So trust it.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, if you're ready, I would love for you to share the breathwork practice.
Absolutely.
Let's
connect.
I'm just going to mute myself.
go ahead, mute yourself. I've got about 6 minutes here of music, and what we're going to do is we're going to drop in, just kind of slowly connecting to the body, and then we're going to do that triactive breath in through the nose, really long exhale through the mouth, which I will teach you again. And we're going to do that for about 4 minutes, right? Maybe a little bit less, maybe around 3.5. The things that you can expect are emotions, any and all emotions to come up, even in these shorter integrative practices. Sometimes the body just feels overwhelmed being seen and grateful sometimes, but also like, oh my gosh, you're looking at me, paying attention to me. And it's going to express grief or maybe anger or irritation or joy and excitement. Like any emotions that come up in the body are normal and to be expected. So my invitation there is to just hold space for them without trying to direct them at all. Just be there with it. Same thing with your thoughts. If your mind is racing, just be there with your thoughts. They don't need to go anywhere. Just allow them to float in and out of your mind. You might experience lightheadedness, tingling in your hands, feet, or face, any sort of like auditory wah-wah-wahs. And just don't do this while you're driving or like holding a baby. Make sure you're sitting down and in a supported position. The breath we're going to do today is that triactive breath. So that's the 3-part breath, filling your belly, filling your chest, and then exhaling all through the mouth. So it's that 2-step double level breath, filling in with your inhale and an exhale through the mouth, releasing all of that air out. Try it with me now. Breathing in through your mouth, filling deep into your belly, filling up into the chest as much as is comfortable, and exhaling. Beautiful. We're going to continue that throughout the practice, but we'll start by just connecting in through the nose, out through the mouth, with a few cleansing breaths. So finding your seat, settling in, just taking notice of the state of your body today, without an agenda, without needing anything to be different, just opening up that compassionate center to witness what is today. Breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. That's it. Just feeling how stable your legs or your seat is beneath you. Witnessing the stability of the walls around you as it extends out into the earth, all of these incredible containers that are here to support your journey. And that includes your body as a container for your joy, your awakening, your peace of mind. A container for your love and your connections and all that you desire to create. And when you're ready, breathing deep into your body, filling the belly, filling the chest, and exhaling all through the mouth, leaning into that triactive breath at a pace that feels good for you. That's it. Finding your rhythm. Trusting your body to settle into this new breath as it explores and discovers it. Beautiful. It is safe to breathe. It is safe to connect with exactly what is present for you right now, no matter what that is. Breathing in. You are so loved, so infinitely right. Good. Breathing in all the way deep into the heart space, lifting your heart up towards the sky, grounding all of that energy down into the earth. Beautiful. Trusting the breath, trusting the genius of your body. It is safe to breathe. It is safe to feel and to surrender to the flow of your life. That's it. Breathing into the unknown, finding that certainty, that connection to self that is always with you, no matter where you are or what you're feeling. Always home, forever connected. And taking one big final inhale here, filling the belly, filling the chest, exhaling all of that air out, and holding the breath down at the bottom, lungs empty, witnessing your ability to contain even the unknown, dropping any tension in the throat or the chest, seeing if you can relax it down into your belly. That's it. And coming back to your natural breath, letting the body breathe itself. Welcome back. And just connecting to the toes, drawing that gentle awareness up the legs to the thighs, slowly, lovingly, trickling it into the hips, drawing it up with your breath into the belly, into the chest and the arms. All the way up into that heart space. And before fully returning, while you have that heart space connection, just asking your body, what do you need me to know, do, or feel? Listening in, even if it's just silence that arrives. What do you need me to know, do, or feel today? Letting that answer come in. Knowing that there is nothing you could ever do that is wrong. And maybe if it feels good for you, drawing that answer up through that center of your voice and your throat, letting it land on your tongue, maybe whispering it out into space to speak it out into the space around you, into your world. And bringing that gentle awareness to the backs of your eyes and fluttering them open when you're ready. Finding something that brings you joy to focus on before you come back to your space, to the rest of your day. Thank you for breathing with me today.
So good. Can I just say that opening my eyes and your smile is just so supportive and so nice. It's
Oh, I love you. I'm here for you.
that was magic. And I love your guidance at the end with sort of that invitation to tune in. Because I think, you know, with anxiety, we don't want to tune in so much of the time. And I think there's so much of us that just longs to be heard and seen.
Yeah. So much in there. So much in there. And the anxiety can seek to control, right? And so the beautiful thing is you get to rewrite that script, that control comes from the mind, that safety comes from the mind, and shift it to be you get control because your body always has the answers. You don't have to reel and freak out and panic to find the answers. Your body has the answers you need in all realms, not just being present and out of states of stress, but in making decisions and creatively creating and taking those steps forward that will really allow you to be in alignment with your authentic self and your authentic voice and your purpose for this life. Like your body always has the answers. So that's that sense of control, that need for control that anxiety desires can be shifted to be like, I am in control. I have it within. So, okay, this is what we're going to do to soothe the anxiety. We're going to turn inwards and we're going to find those aligned actions as they're ready to come through and be patient with the process. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me in that today. It's been really amazing speaking with you and connecting on this topic that is so real for so many people, but is also not a requirement, right? You're not required to feel stressed and anxious. There is a life without that level of suffering where you can use feelings of anxiety as indicators for empowerment and shifts and change and alignment.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I so appreciate you sharing that with us and being here. And you will find all of Eliah's details in the show notes, the link for the Kaleidoscope channel, Eliah's Instagram. So please reach out if you would like to connect.
Definitely. And join me on TikTok too. I love my TikTok community. I love my TikTokers.
I haven't got around TikTok yet, but I know there are lots of people who love it. So I'll have to get into that. I'm dragging the chain.
I know. I love my TikTokers. Yeah. We talk a lot about breathwork, but also the embodied boundaries and creative coping side of things. And there's so many resources out there available to everybody. So know that you're not alone. There's tons of mentors and ways to create, but ultimately you've got all you need already existing within you. So thank you so much for holding this space and having this podcast as well and talking about such an important topic. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you so much, Eliah.
Yeah, I'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to the Us Anxious Folk podcast, the podcast for the chronically overwhelmed, perpetually panicked, anxious folk in all of us. If you would like to find more about me, you can find me on YouTube at Lauren Rose or on Instagram at Lauren R_Rose.